Hello, my name is Taylor, and tonight I will be talking about my topic for assessment number 1 in this course. My assessment is about how African Americans are portrayed in media, specifically in police brutality cases. Basically, I want to touch on how African Americans are portrayed in the media versus white people when it comes to police fatally shooting people when things go wrong or the officer has a wrong call and judgment. In my essay, I talk a lot about Walter Scott, and I will touch on him in this video, but I also want to expand on another case as well. So, Walter Scott was an African American man from South Carolina in America, and Walter Scott was pulled over for a routine traffic stop by Michael Slager. And as Slager was running his name through the system back in his cop car, Scott decided to get out of his car and run away. And so, of course, Slager pursued him. And according to Slager, they got into a little bit of a fight. And then he said that he felt threatened because Scott reached for his taser. And he said that he felt threatened for his life. And so he shot him, ultimately ending his life. Of course, the police decided to open an investigation on what happened, but the way that the media responded was very rash. Instead of waiting for the investigation to be fully flushed out and gone through, they decided to jump the gun and start blaming Scott. A lot of journalists started to touch on his race and criminal background, saying that he had been arrested multiple times with one violent charge, even though every article failed to mention that his one violent charge was when he was 20 years old, nearly 30 years ago, because he was 50 when he died. And they started to basically blame Scott. And instead of taking time to realize that this was just Slager's account of what happened, they started to report what Slager had said as factual information. One news outlet, Post and Courier, did a good job of making sure the things that they were saying were backed up by people, such as Slager said or Slager's attorney stated, instead of taking these quotes and these informations from these people, presenting them as facts, which ABC and CBC affiliated news stations did do this. A few days later, a civilian came forward and said that he had a video of the encounter. At this point, I'm going to reference the Journalism Ethics Arguments and Cases for the 21st Century by Roger Patching and Martin Rust. This was our reading from week 1, and I really thought it was interesting and applied to what I'm about to talk to. It's a section that says, "Who's a journalist nowadays and doesn't matter." It says, in an age where anyone with a smartphone can record audio, video, or text and upload it to YouTube or their Facebook page or Twitter or Instagram feed, and countless bloggers give their opinion on anything and everything on a daily basis, what constitutes a journalist? Technology allows the global publication of pictures, news, and information by people who would otherwise not think of themselves as journalists, but who become caught up in events that people want or need to know about. And in this instance, the man who came forward, his name was Santana, he believed that people needed to see what happened. And in that sense, he was a journalist. And he practiced more ethical journalism than a whole lot of the real journalists did in this case, which I think is really fascinating because he was just a civilian walking to work that day. But basically, he uploaded a video that of the shooting, and he had witnessed it himself. And the video basically disputed everything Slager had said. There was no scuffle, they didn't fight, and Slager had shot Scott as he was running away, which definitely poses some problems for the journalists because they made Scott out to seem like a terrible man when he was in fact the victim of a pretty blatant murder. So this definitely goes to the code number 1 that says report and interpret honestly, striving for accuracy, fairness, and disclosure of all essential facts. Do not suppress relevant available facts or give distorting emphasis. And I don't think that they reported honestly or strove for accuracy, because if they did, they would have attributed names to the things that they were saying instead of presenting them as facts. So I have another case study example that is very similar to this. And this is the case of Samuel DuBois. And Samuel DuBois was pulled over for another routine traffic stop by police officer Ray Tensing. Ray Tensing was talking to this man at the front of his car, and as he asked him to step out of the car because he would not produce his license, DuBois reached over to start his ignition, and the car was in neutral, barely started going, and Tensing claims that he felt threatened, that he was going to get ran over by this car, and he shot DuBois in the face one time, killed him, basically on spot. And a lot of controversy arose from this, especially because it happened only 5 months after the Scott case, and people were really skeptical, but still, media outlets blamed the black man who was shot. And they, again, did not wait for more information to come out or anything. And it wasn't like an unbiased, neutral report of what happened. It was very much so victim blaming, as if these people didn't learn from the last time, learn from your history, but whatever. So the reports from the London Evening Standard, Washington Post, and the original CNN story identified DuBois's lengthy criminal history, saying that he had been arrested more than 60 times. They also all reported that he handed the officer a bottle of alcohol when he asked to see the license. A lot of articles also said that this man was on campus or on the edge of campus, even though the campus of the University of Connecticut, which is in America, trying to spin it as this African-American man being creepy, driving around all these college kids, which that wasn't true at all because they were way off campus. And it was a lot like the Scott case, where people kind of jumped the gun and started to blame the victim. And it does make you wonder, since there is such an institutionalized racist mindset in America, unfortunately, if this would have been the same if it were a white man driving that car, or, a different situation. And I think that that's really interesting to think about. The two theories that I focus on in my essay is framing theory and agenda setting theory. And these two theories go hand in hand. So agenda setting theory is basically that the media does not tell you what to think, but what to think about. And then framing explains how a journalistic story or media presents the story to the audience. That's how they're going to interpret it and feel about it. So if I write a story about somebody and I talk about their lengthy criminal history and how they were drunk driving, being a creep, driving around campus, and they were shot by a police officer, you would care a lot less if I said, look at this man, he had 3 children, he was on his way home from work, he was loved, a good person, good heart, was shot and killed by a police officer. So those are two pretty good examples of how framing can really warp the minds of the readers, even if they do not know that it's happening, because a lot of it can happen subconsciously. And perpetrating these racist mindsets and portraying them in the media definitely curates a negative, stereotypical mindset of the public. Now, this next thing that I want to speak about is a little bit different. It's not police brutality. It's along the same lines, but I think that it's very interesting to talk about as well. And it's basically how 2 fathers charged with murder are covered by the media. So Chris Watts was a white father from America who was charged with the first-degree murder of killing his pregnant wife and his 2 daughters. It was a brutal death. And it was a really terrible story. I mean, it still disturbs me deeply about what he did to these girls. But all of the media coverage of him were these beautiful pictures of him and his family. And all the quotes were, he seemed like he would die for his daughters, and he was hailed a hero by his daughters, and amazing family man, and beautiful pictures of them. But the coverage for Melvin Harris III was drastically different. This black father from Arizona, which is also in America, was charged with a second-degree murder after he fatally punched a man who followed his 16-year-old daughter into a public bathroom and tried to enter her stall. Obviously, murdering people is not okay in any kind of way, but what Harris did for his daughter versus what Watts did for his family are drastically different. Harris got very upset that this creepy man was following his daughter into the bathroom and acted not correctly, but acted in such a way, and he has been portrayed so much different. Most outlets that represented Harris post pictures of his mugshot with the headlines that say, "Police say Arizona man who followed teen into restroom is beaten to death," or "An Arizona father is behind bars for murder after police say he beat a man." And there are also no photos of him and his daughter, who he was defending, which is also kind of ethically weird because that was, who it was all about. Like, he was defending his daughter, and Chris Watts has all of these beautiful styled pics of him and his family all over the internet. I mean, you can do a quick search of both of these names, and you can see the huge difference in between the two. So that is my topic on how media and journalistic outlets portray African Americans as victims in police brutality cases, and then also just a little bit of how they're portrayed in general when it comes to murder compared to white people. And it's incredibly unfair and unethical for journalists to portray African Americans this way. Because really and truly, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're white, black, purple, blue. Murdering people is wrong, and being murdered is terrible, and everybody deserves the same kind of respect. Thank you.